Welcome to the Dundee Voices podcast, where we shine a spotlight on the people behind Dundee's third sector. In this episode, I speak to Darren Sayer from Hope Point, a charity offering mental health support 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Stay tuned as we discuss what it means to build a service that leaves nobody behind, and the challenges that come with making that vision a reality.
Hi Ben.
Hi there, Darren. How's it
See
going?
ya. Yeah, how are you?
Good to see you. I'm good. Thanks so much for having me.
Good. No worries at all.
So tell me about the Hope Point then.
So Hope Point's a 24-hour drop-in centre for anybody in emotional distress, so they can come to speak to someone anytime, day or night, when they're feeling distressed or dysregulated. It's manned by peer practitioners, so that means it's people who have a lived experience element, who really get a sense of where they're at with their recovery journey.
Ah, fantastic, cool. And this is the reception area then?
Yeah, so as you've done just now, people would come in during the day to get support. 9 to 5, you'd have people available in the reception area to sort of meet you and make sure that you're made comfortable, make sure you get the offer of a tea or a coffee or something, make sure that you feel settled. At which point they'll then make sure a practitioner comes through to greet you and help you with whatever's going on for you the day. So they usually take about 5 minutes to come through. We've also got a range of toys and books and things like that for people if they've got children with them. Helps to keep them settled and give families options as well.
Fantastic. Well, we'll take a look at the rest of the place then?
Yeah, shall we do the tour? So through here we've got the cafe, which usually practitioners are sat in at night, and it means that they can just see what it is that's going on outside, just in case there's anybody coming by the door that's looking to speak to somebody. People like sitting in the cafe as well. It gives them a sense that they can, I guess, have a space to more neutrally talk about what they're feeling. It means that they can look at somebody as they're making a coffee as well and see eyes on from the kitchen here as well, just what's going on, just in case there's anything else that needs done. Mm-hmm. Obviously, some people prefer a more intimate venue, I suppose, so we've also got one-to-one support rooms as well that work quite well for that. So I'll show you those as well.
Yeah, let's have a look.
Awesome. So in here we've got our support rooms. They're all neutrally furnished and made to feel as comfortable as possible, as non-clinical as possible, is what was asked for when we first came to be. And I think it really feels as you'd want it to. It doesn't feel oppressive, it feels nice, chilled. Our appointments are, varying in what length we'll have people in. It could take an hour, it could take 2. It really depends on the individual person, how long they need to be here. So we wanted the room to feel like that as well.
It really is a very nice, warm, sort of welcoming space as well. You do feel the relaxed vibe in here. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, anyway, Darren, thank you so much for showing me around the place. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in the studio.
Likewise, looking forward to it, man.
Thanks very much for
that.
Take care. Take care. Darren, thank you very much for joining us today. It's good to have you.
Thank you. It's good that I've been able to change my clothes since the last appearance,
Absolutely.
I didn't want to draw attention to any continuity errors, like my hair being short or anything, but
Well, you're looking very fresh, I must say.
You too.
So tell me a bit about how Hope Point first came to life.
So initially, I can never get the dates exactly right, so please forgive me and don't fact check too hardly on this. But in, I think it was 2018, there was a report out regarding Tayside and the sort of mental health services and what could be done to improve. There was an ask for there to be more of an emphasis on crisis and community resources. So there was a long roadmap to that, which led to Hope Point. Part of it involved stakeholders, it involved surveying and asking people, and people who felt very strongly there needed to be a drop-in centre of some sort, a crisis centre by another name, for Dundee. So along that way, obviously there were a few roadblocks. We had a global pandemic, I'm sure everyone noticed. We had the building identified as the one next door to Robertson's, which caught fire. So there was a few things that slowed it down in the process, but along the way there were a few developments, such as the distress brief intervention pathway, which then became sort of the base model for what support was looking like in Tayside and across Scotland as well. There was still the ask for, at the time, the Community Wellbeing Centre, which then went out to tender via the Health and Social Care Partnership. Penumbra Mental Health, who had been supporting people in Dundee at the time for, was it 15 years, I think, in 2022? So that's 18 years now that Penumbra has operated within Dundee. They submitted a tender and were successful in securing the contract for the Community Wellbeing Centre. And then through several other stakeholder groups, it then landed on the name Hope Point. So it's been open since the 31st of July 2023. I was there the first day it opened, and I got to open the shutters and think, this is never going to close again. That was an odd feeling. So yeah, it's been a long time coming for the city, and I think it's been really nice to lead on that and see it evolve from a concept to a reality. You know, it's been really, really rewarding to see people get such a benefit from it.
No, absolutely. And, this model of a sort of 24/7 wellbeing centre, it's an absolutely fantastic model. Was this an idea that was generated in Dundee, or was there inspiration taken from elsewhere in the country for that?
There was definitely inspiration elsewhere. So Penumbra Mental Health also operates the Crisis Centre in Edinburgh, and that similarly is 24/7. Edinburgh being a very different city, I suppose, to Dundee means that has to be done through referral rather than as open as what we are. And the Nuke in Perth was another sort of place that we visited early doors, that we were sort of looking at places that did it, and we liked the homely decoration, the kind of familial feel, I suppose, not strictly family, but it didn't feel like a hospital setting. It didn't feel like it was clinical. It felt homely, it felt welcoming, and it was reassuring. And they worked really alongside people for like a period of time to ensure they could reduce their suicidality.
Yep. And that homely feel is something that really came across to me when I was visiting as well. I remember something you mentioned to me before was that the evidence shows that this is a good model, but particularly for men was something you told me.
Yeah, so there's been a few meetings that I've gone to, and we've obviously had a few reports that we've put out. The 2-year review is one that I hand out quite a lot because it's a nice glossy booklet and it looks good when you hand it to people. I can thank my previous colleague Emma Wilson for that. She worked really hard on that and making sure that looked well. Good to present. So one of the key figures in there is sort of looking at the male to female ratio in terms of people supported in Dundee. And I think it was about 40% of the people that we were seeing was male. And I remember there was there was a meeting where some people from the NHS were quite surprised at that, about how high a rate that is for men to attend. And I think part of that, we sort of touched on this earlier as well, was the way that people access support is very different across that sort of gender idea. So men are less likely to engage with their GP first. They're more likely to want to open up to a conversation informally, whether that's with mates, with Andy's Man's Club or whatever. But that then means that they don't necessarily have anything diagnosed. So if they've got a problem, they can't necessarily go to their GP or their mental health team because they're not already linked in as a part of it, or don't recognise that that's what they need. Right. So I think because we are, free, and you can drop in, you can phone, you can text, there's options there that mean that men are able to get the help and support as and when they sort of identify that they needed it, and can be directed to get that help from their other supports as well. Yeah, because I know the evidence suggests that men are less likely to seek support for their mental health when they need it, less likely than women, for example. Mm-hmm. So it's just something that really interested me, that this does seem to be a model that works for men, and men are coming to Hope Point for support as well. I think they're less likely to identify it as being, I am mentally unwell, more, I don't feel like myself, something's got to me, there's been a life event that's led me to this, and more likely to, I guess, go for a decision that could lead to long-term consequences in terms of, risk-taking behaviour. So if they turn to substance use, if they turn to potentially more lethal methods in terms of suicide, that is the risk factor for men. So ultimately, a timely response is what's needed. Yeah, no, absolutely. Thinking more about your own personal journey as well, how did your own personal journey lead you to working at Hope Point? So, I guess looking at Dundee, I moved here for university. I studied psychology at University of Dundee, and just something about this city. It's just, I'm from Dunfermline originally, and I think what I like about Dundee is it has the feel of a town while it still has the size of a city. Things are still walking distance. You can get to the city centre easy enough from anywhere that you need to. And folk on the street still talk to you. They still say hiya, are quite friendly. So I'd always had the initiative in my head to want to do something in my life that was helping people, especially with mental health problems. I'd seen a lot of people when I was in school and throughout my adult life that really struggled with their mental health and not knowing what to do with it. And I find myself becoming a listening ear a lot of the time for people and their problems. So I've always sort of geared myself towards that kind of career, I suppose. I worked in the third sector with a children's charity in Dundee as my first role out of uni. Worked with that for a few years during the pandemic and sort of got to grips with different people and saw their issues from there. And then when I saw that Dundee was looking at developing a 24-hour centre for people, I was really taken with that approach. I'll be honest, when I applied for the role, I wasn't so much interested in the manager side of it as I was the community wellbeing aspect of it. I think it was really interesting and a really, a good thing for the city. I was keen to be involved with it and to sort of put my contributions there. And again, it's what happens. You chuck in an application thinking, it's fine, it'll just be interview experience, and then suddenly you're here. So
suddenly you're right in the thick of it.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, I guess for me, it was always a case of I'm really passionate about these services in terms of Dundee and in terms of making mental health feel approachable to people, feeling like reducing the barriers for people. Yeah. So it's always been a passion of mine, I would say.
And I know that at Hope Point, lived experience is something that's like quite a big element of the support there. Do you consider yourself as having lived experience when it comes to mental health?
No, I consider myself to be really lucky, I suppose, in the sense that I've not had anything that I would consider being that sort of lived experience background. I've been fortunate enough that I've got a really supportive family, a good network of friends, and haven't ever really wanted for much, to be fair. Yeah. And I try and take that with the good graces of thinking, well, I've been lucky. That doesn't mean everyone else has. Yeah. You want to, do your best to help everyone attain some sort of level of stability and help in their lives. So.
Even that concept of lived experience is quite an interesting one, isn't it? Because we tend to think your lived experience of mental health conditions or mental illnesses, but I suppose in a sense we've all got lived experiences of life and we've all gone through our own hardships and our own losses as well. So
yeah, it's really funny because when my role was slightly different, so I've went from a few different transitions in my role. So they went from a few service managers in the Hope Point. I did it after saying that I wouldn't call it the Hope Point, of course. In Hope Point, we started off with 3 service managers. Eventually, that got changed to be 1 operations manager, which is myself. That meant that I wasn't able to take part in the shifts, so not able to support people as often as I would like directly. And I was always upfront about not having necessarily the same lived experience model that all our practitioners have. And I guess that's one thing I didn't necessarily cover. We didn't intend for it to be 100% staffed in peer roles, but the quality of the applications that we had in terms of people that came with lived experience was so high and the feedback from people that had gotten support from people with lived experience was so high that it just made sense to have it be an integral part of Hope Point. So I come to that because when I supported people and was sometimes quite upfront about my lack, I suppose, of lived experience directly, sometimes people would be like, no, I'm not really sure I want to take any advice from you because that's not what I'm here for. It's like, okay, that's fine. Yeah. And kind of had to take that on, take that one for the team a little bit. It's an interesting one.
It's an interesting balance there because I've worked with Penumbra in the past myself, and I remember supporting people. People really liked the lived experience that the practitioners had, and it made them feel really comfortable and like they could share things. But I think it's interesting as well because it's not as if you need lived experience to have compassion or to be able to give care to people. It's just, I think it brings up some interesting questions around lived experience and the support that entails.
Yeah, I think obviously there's lots of people involved in statutory services and other charity organisations that don't have lived experience and they work with them fine. But I think the dimension of support they're looking for at Hope Point, if they've got preconceived notions of it, is I want somebody who I don't have to explain these feelings to professionally. I want to be able to just be honest and just say what I'm feeling from my heart. If I don't directly have that lived experience, I still can, but I think people will have that doubt, that I'm still going to try and use processes, not people.
Well, that's an interesting reflection. That's very interesting. So you mentioned you worked at Aberlour in the past as well, and I'm assuming that was more of a 9-to-5 sort of job than Hope Point, perhaps?
Theoretically, yeah.
And I'm wondering what that transition was like for you, just moving from Aberlour to this more 24/7 based model of support.
I'm going to be paradoxical here and say that I got more time back. So maybe that's just due to the nature of the work. But in Aberlour, there was an options service that worked for people with disabilities. And so you would support families out in their community, sort of out, not necessarily 9 to 5, I would say. It could vary wildly. Yeah. So sometimes you'd start at 8 and then not get back until 8 o'clock at night, just depending on what the families needed. You'd still get your time back throughout the week.
So these sort of unsociable hours are your bread and butter then?
Pretty much,
like.
yeah. So when I was told, okay, we're looking at 12 hours, 3 days a week, I was like, cool, that's fine. I'm doing 12 hours, sometimes 5 days a week anyway. So, wasn't as big a transition as it was. I'd never done night shift before, and that was definitely learning. You've got to prepare a bit for sort of the 4 to 5 a.m. hour where things are just a bit weird and you're feeling a bit like, oh, I'm not quite sleepy, but I'm also not awake.
Yeah.
And just conscious that there could be somebody dropping in for support or phoning at any time. So I'm not saying you have to be 100% on your A game at that time, but you need to be able to respond in kind, I guess, if you needed to be called up.
I think that segues us nice into my next question. Just what challenges has Hope Point had to overcome over the years it's been open?
I think at the start it was about building a brand recognition and sort of developing the logo, which you can see Dave is modelling lovely for us there. It was about making sure that people were aware of what it is we do in terms of peer support for people in emotional distress, and communicating that with statutory partners, with the GP, and just ensuring we got it right. So again, we're in uncharted territory for us because none of us had performed the role at that point yet. I know lots of people were asking questions at the start of opening, like, what if this happens? What if that happens? And you would think there's a lot of risks that hang over your head having a resource that's open 24/7. But, and I don't want to knock the table to, mess up the audio, but touch wood, there hasn't been all that much in terms of what we've had to deal with in terms of challenging behaviours or things like that. I think people would assume that if we're open 24/7, then we're open to all sorts of risk, and that is true.
Yeah.
But I think because of the nature of Hope Point, because you can come in and get help from somebody who gets it, it's a gentle approach. It's not like it's a statutory service where there's expectations of anything. People are generally coming to it in good faith, I would say. So I'm not trying to downplay any challenges, because I think there still have been sort of challenges in terms of recognising how the roles work, making sure it works for everybody. But majority of the time has worked quite well.
So when you speak about some of the risks that you were perhaps preparing for or planning for when it was in development, what were some of the things people envisaged might be problems, or what were some of the expectations maybe people had around that?
I think sometimes it was around risk of if someone was intoxicated, and whether or not Friday night, absolutely, that's it. And I guess there are occasions like that where things have happened, where we've had people who are in distress, who are intoxicated, who maybe struggle to keep themselves safe. And that's sort of our role in play. And how do we figure out from here, where's a safe place for you to go? How do we work out, right, do you want to come back here tomorrow? We'll sort things out a bit more. Do we give you the advice of, going up to A&E if things are particularly bad? Sort of making sure that we risk plan and make sure that it gets it right. So, yeah, I guess some of the risks that we were looking at were, in the long term, going to be things that would happen, but I guess it's how we responded to it that surprised ourselves. Penumbra does provide quite a lot of training for people who are in distress, for handling difficult situations and for how to give your peer lived experience in a genuine way. And I think that gave us a really good anchor to sort of steer the ship, if that's even the phrase.
No, that makes sense. And it's, I guess you're in a situation where you're having to plan for scenarios that anything could happen. You have to try and think ahead of time, what are the things that could happen that we're not thinking about. But it sounds like it's not been too challenging so far. You've been able to...
I think it's about establishing effective partnerships for us. So I think at the start, we had a soft launch period where we wanted to make sure that we had things right for the people in support, and we said, look, we don't want any referrals in just now, just self-referral, just people who needs to get help rather than organisations sending them on their way. Now, we did have a couple of organisations that reached out to try and help us during that stage, and also to ask people to get help, as you would expect. It wasn't until, I suppose, 6 months in that we'd managed to get a formal pathway set up with colleagues from emergency services and things like that. So once you had that in place, it kind of makes things work a bit better, because again, coming down with a police officer is going to feel very different to if you come down on your own. And it's just about making sure that we had that, I guess, expectation right for everybody, that they knew that they'd be treated the right way.
Yeah. No, that's good. And something else I just wanted to ask is, night shifts are obviously a big part of what happens at Hope Point. I was just wondering if you could give me a sense of how does it feel being on those night shifts when there's maybe not appointments like you would have at a normal service, but you're there sort of waiting with your colleagues, and any minute someone can come through the door with any sort of issue. What's the mood like at Hope Point at night? How does that feel?
I think when you're on night shift at Hope Point, it can feel... So you're in the same room with people for 12 hours.
Yeah.
So I think there's acknowledgement that sometimes you're going to want to step away and give yourself some time to yourself, because it's a long time to spend around people, especially if it's people who, you know, are going through the same sleep withdrawal as you, or are trying to adjust to sort of a new shift pattern. So we try and give good graces as much as possible, but generally quite positive, I would say. You know, if people aren't busy and have got something that they can do to sort of keep themselves amused, like read a book or watch a show or something to try and keep themselves entertained, I'd rather that, and rather than be able to sort of pause it and know that they can do what they need to do to speak to somebody in distress, rather than feeling like they need to complete needless busy work. So
generally, it's quite a relaxed mood when there's not people coming.
I think it's
for
important to
support.
have that, because otherwise you're going to create a distressing atmosphere. If you've got people that feel like, oh well, I can't support you because I'm too busy cleaning the shelves, I'm too busy cleaning the kitchen, I need to stop this, and now I'm halfway through cleaning the kitchen. I'd rather not have that kind of atmosphere.
So the support workers have the sort of space to focus on giving that support, and then space to unwind in between those supports as well.
And they get to know each other well throughout that as well. So obviously you go through periods of seeing people a lot and then not seeing people a lot in terms of your colleagues, because the shift patterns work in such a way that maybe I'll be on shift with Ben and then I won't see Ben for another 3 weeks. So it just depends. So it's nice to have that time to sort of get to know each other a bit, and, you know, spend that time playing a board game or something. If the night is quiet, we don't tend to say that word because, you know, you don't want to jinx it. But
yeah, exactly. So what are some of the emerging trends that's shaping the work of Hope Point just now? What are some of the trends you're noticing?
I think there's been a real challenging perspective where there are people who are difficult to support, or at least have mental health conditions which make it challenging to find the right supports for them.
Yeah.
And I think that can sometimes be a bit of a struggle. I think one of the things with mental health services, statutory and voluntary, is that in order to get help, you need to engage with processes. And that could be really challenging for someone who may not have the ability to keep events or dates or things in their head, I suppose. So oftentimes we do get people who maybe haven't got the ability to commit to appointments, or their lifestyle has sort of made that challenging. So then it becomes a game of, well, there's nothing that service can do, there's nothing that service can do. How do we get this person safe? How do we set this person up for success? And I think that's been really challenging. I think, you know, reflections on being a 24/7 service is you start to see the trends in terms of what's out there for people and what's not out there. I think Dundee's brilliant because it has so many services together, and that this podcast series will even highlight a lot of the positive stories that come through from Dundee's voices. But I think you still see quite a lot of gaps, and you still see a lot of people still falling through the gaps, even if there is somewhere that people can come no matter what 24/7. If there's no follow-up from us, which by nature we're responding to people in distress.
Yeah, it's not long-term support you're necessarily offering.
But we do still have a duty of care to make sure people are felt safe and, you know, have the next steps towards recovery.
Yeah.
It's making sure that all those steps keep happening that can be quite challenging. Again, there's lots of developments that go on in Dundee, so we attend a multi-agency consultation hub for people who are both using substances and have mental health diagnosis, and that's a useful time for those services, statutory and voluntary, to come together to discuss what they would consider to be difficult or complex cases where maybe there's a couple competing needs where they're not sure of where to take it. And it's promoted with such a positive ethos of, let's just keep everything on the table to help this person. Let's try everything. Let's test this to see how it works. And I think the fact that it's hosted within us is good, because we have the likelihood that we're going to see people at random hours where they feel like they've needed to reach out. And it's quite good to have it there.
And I suppose sometimes you'll be seeing people at Hope Point that maybe feel like they don't have anywhere else to go, or there's maybe no other service that can help them. Hope Point's maybe the place that comes to mind. Do you feel like in the position you're in, you get a good overview of mental health services in Dundee and you can see where the gaps are or where there's maybe services missing?
I would say so. I think it's trying to make it work in terms of the resources you have, because I think that is always the difficulty, isn't it? Is about working within the budget or remit that you have. And I think people do so much in Dundee. You know, they really do everything they can to support people. But you sometimes see people shrugging their shoulders and they'll say, well, there's nothing that I can do. And it's not, I don't want to help this person and I can't help this person. It's I'm limited by, you know, what's available to me at the minute.
Yeah, and it's a difficult time for the voluntary sector in Dundee as well, just now with funding restraints and lack of resources and charities closing and all these things.
And there you are saying it.
Yeah, well, I'm going to say it's unavoidable in these conversations. So looking forward now to 2030, for example, what does the future look like for Hope Point?
I think one of the things that I touched on was we get quite a lot of interest in terms of people outside of Dundee as well. So we get interest from people who are running community wellbeing centres or something to those likes that run but not to the 24/7 element. I think in cities that's really been a crucial aspect that needs to be available for people. You know, I think mental health crisis doesn't wait till appointment hours. You know,
No, exactly.
It waits for no one. And I think the more barriers or checks you have in place in terms of a discrete diagnosis, in terms of you need to have gone through this hoop in order to get help, the more likely it is that someone is going to make an attempt on their life. So I think having a kind, compassionate service where people can pop in and feel listened to, and not just textbook, you know, this is what you need to do, this is the medication you need to take. So for me, I'd really hope that the model of Hope Point acts as sort of a source of inspiration to, you know, councils and partnerships across Scotland, because I think it's really something that works for us well, and I think it could serve so many cities well.
So really you'd love to see Hope Point replicated across the country?
I think so, and I know there's certainly been elements to do that. You know, the Beacon in Angus has certainly taken a lot of inspiration in terms of model delivery. They are 12 till 12, I believe. So it works well for Angus and the sort of region that it is. Yeah. But I do think that I still hear from sort of colleagues in emergency services that are a bit like, you know, the 24 element aspect of Hope Point is the thing on top of the peer support, what it does that makes it so unique and so helpful to them and to the people that they, you know, find themselves working with.
So with that in mind, what's the top piece of advice that you would give to someone starting a Hope Point elsewhere?
Wow. Okay. Prepare for the unexpected. Is that too cliched? I feel like it's true though.
I think it fits. Absolutely, yeah.
And you know what? I think I'm going to say that, but I'm also going to say that I think we can often get bogged down in worrying about process and procedures and, you know, how do we stop this from happening, and risk management can look like that, where it is just too many blockades to getting something off the ground. Yeah. I think if you start the work and you have people who are like-minded and want to help people, you know, what is it that said, build it and they will come? I think that's kind of how it goes. I didn't expect Hope Point to be easy to run, and I'm not saying that it is, but I think it's more straightforward than I would have thought, because I think people want help. They get help by coming in to drop in, and keeping it as few barriers as possible has been instrumental in that. So keep it open and keep it as accessible as possible. I think that's really important for mental health recovery.
It sounds like your advice here is almost just do it. just do it.
Did we get brand clearance on that one? I don't know if we can. Yeah.
Well, we're saying it. So just wrap things up now. What's a book that you think everyone interested in mental health should read?
See, I've gone back and forth on this one because obviously I haven't read the book in a while. So this comes with the giant asterisk. It's a young adult book called It's Kind of a Funny Story by Ned Vizzini.
Okay.
So I say this because I watched the movie first, and then I read the book second, and this was many, many moons ago. So the book is about this really highly strung teenager called Craig, who finds himself in a mental health ward by admitting himself after speaking to someone on a suicide hotline. And it goes to show his experiences in the mental health ward, how his journey develops with the other people on the ward, and what he learns from people in general adult mental health. So I think it's relevant to sort of a lot of the things that we see in Dundee in terms of that. I will say some asterisks because the book is 15 years old now and maybe it hasn't aged the best.
Right, okay.
But what I liked about it is I liked its portrayal of people in mental health professional roles. I liked its portrayal of how this man's thought process went, you know, the catastrophizing, excuse me, that goes through his head in terms of, well, if I don't have a good job, then I'll not be able to get a good wife. If I don't get a good wife, I won't have kids. The thing that keeps snowballing and escalating.
Yeah.
I think it's a really nice one that sort of highlights how that sort of neurodiverse mind works as well. Okay. Just a really interesting book, and I think you'll probably get a lot of non-fiction recommendations, so I thought I'd bring you a fiction recommendation this time.
Yeah, that's another one for me to add to. I'm going to have a big Goodreads list after all these episodes. So before we close things up, just tell me about this guest you've brought along to join us today.
This is Dave The Coo. He's our mascot. So yeah, I don't really have much else to say on him other than he is our security aspect of the Hope Point project. You know, he is the giver of good hugs. He is the giver of warmth. And he always greets everybody when you come in at reception. Even though we have a receptionist 9 to 5, he is there 24/7, so he'll always welcome you.
That's fantastic. So we've been joined by Darren and Dave,
in a
head of security
role.
at Hope Point. Darren and Dave, it's been so good having you on the podcast today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good to be here, Ben. Thank you.
Thank you so much.